In 50 years of sitting with the dying, not one of them ever talked about the things they did. They talked about the things they did not do. I am 82 years old. I was a country doctor, and I drove the same county roads at 2 in the morning with nothing in my headlights but a deer and the white line, going to hold the hand of somebody who was leaving. I have sat in that chair more than 1,000 times, and there is a truth about the end of a life that nobody is told until it is far too late to use it. You are still early enough. That is the whole reason I am talking to you tonight. My name is George. I delivered babies on kitchen tables. I set broken arms in barns. But people think a doctor's hardest job is the diagnosis. It is not. The hardest job is the chair beside the bed in the last hour, when the only medicine left is that you stayed. And I want to tell you what I heard from that chair. Not the medical part, the human part. The thing people say when the pretending is finally over. Because you are going to be in a version of that room one day, on one side of the bed or the other. And I would rather you heard this now, with the breath still in your chest, than learn it the hard way, like everyone in these stories did. There is a phone call you have not made. I will get to that. First, let me take you to the very first deathbed I ever sat at. I was 26 years old. I had been a doctor for less than a year. Her name was Edith, and she had been the schoolteacher in our town for 40 years, the kind of woman who had taught the parents of the children she was now teaching. She was 89. Cancer in the stomach. There was nothing to be done, and we both knew it. It was January. The radiator in her bedroom clanked every few minutes, like somebody knocking to come in. There was a glass of water on the nightstand with her false teeth in it, and a photograph of a man in an army uniform, faded almost to brown. Her husband, I always assumed, though now that I say it, I am not certain she ever told me. I had come to check on her, to do the small, useless things a young doctor does to feel useful. Take the pulse. Listen to the chest. Pretend the numbers mean we are still in charge. She watched me do all of it with a little smile, the way she must have watched 1,000 nervous boys recite their times tables. And then she said, "George, sit down. You are making me tired." So I sat. And I asked her, because I did not know what else to ask, if she was afraid. She thought about it for a long time. The radiator clanked. And she said, "I am not afraid of dying. I am angry that I waited." I asked her what she had waited for. I will never forget what she said. She said there was a man before the one in the photograph, a man she had loved when she was 19, and she had been too proud and too frightened and too worried about what the town would say, and she let him get on a train, and she never wrote the letter. 60 years she had carried that. 60 years. She told me she had had a good husband and good children and a good life, and that none of it had ever quite filled the hole where that unwritten letter should have gone. I was 26. I did not understand it. I thought, how can a woman with a whole good life behind her be lying here grieving a boy from 1912? I patted her hand, and I said something stupid and comforting. She let me. She was kind that way. She died 4 days later. And I have thought about her almost every week for 56 years. Because I have learned that Edith was not unusual. Edith was the rule. Here is the thing nobody tells you. When people are dying, they almost never talk about the things they did. They talk about the things they did not do, the chances they did not take, the words they did not say, the person they did not become, because they were waiting for permission that was never going to come. It is almost never the things they did that they grieve. It is the things they kept putting off. I have sat with men who built businesses and men who buried them. I have sat with women who raised 8 children and women who raised none. Rich, poor, faithful, faithless. And the pattern held so steadily that after about 20 years I could feel it coming in the room like weather. The dying do not say, "I wish I had worked harder." They do not say, "I wish I had bought more." They say, "I wish I had picked up the phone. I wish I had gone back. I wish I had told him. I wish I had not been so afraid of looking foolish." Let me tell you about a man named Hollis. Hollis was a farmer, big through the shoulders even at 70, hands like 2 catcher's mitts. He had a heart that was giving out slowly, the way a tired engine does, and he knew it, and he was a stubborn man, so he mostly refused to talk about it. I would come by once a week. We would sit on his porch. He would not let me listen to his heart on the porch because he said the neighbors would think he was sick. Hollis had a son. The son's name was Daniel, and they had not spoken in 11 years. I never got the whole story. Something about the farm, about money, about the son wanting to sell land that Hollis's own father had cleared by hand. There had been words said on a Thanksgiving, or maybe it was a Christmas, I never knew which, the kind of words you cannot take back. And then there had been 11 years of silence, 2 grown men too much alike to ever be the first to fold. One evening in October, Hollis was bad. I could hear the fluid in his lungs from the doorway. He was sitting up because he could not breathe lying down, and the lamp was on, and there were moths beating against the screen. I gave him what comfort I could. And then he grabbed my wrist. And a man that strong grabbing your wrist will get your attention. And he said, "George, will you call my boy?" I called Daniel from the phone in Hollis's kitchen. It was a wall phone, the old kind with the cord that stretched. I remember standing there in that dark kitchen with the cord wrapped around my fingers, listening to it ring in another house 200 miles away, or near enough, somewhere far. Daniel answered. I told him who I was and where I was calling from, and that his father did not have long. There was a silence on the line so long I thought the call had dropped. And then Daniel said, in a voice I will hear until my own end, he said, "Is he asking for me?" I said, "Yes, he is asking for you." Daniel drove all night. He got there a little after 4 in the morning. I had stayed because I did not want Hollis to be alone if the boy did not make it in time. And I want you to understand what I saw, because I have only seen it a few times and it changes you. These 2 enormous, stubborn men, who had wasted 11 years on pride, looked at each other across that little bedroom, and neither one said sorry. They never said the word. Daniel just walked over and took his father's hand, the way you would take the hand of a child crossing a road. And Hollis said, "You came." And Daniel said, "Of course I came." And that was the whole reconciliation. That was 11 years undone in 2 sentences. Hollis died around 7 that morning, with the sun coming up orange through that screen the moths had been beating against all night. Daniel was holding his hand. Now here is the part I need you to hear. On the drive home, I was not thinking, how wonderful, they made it in time. I was thinking about the 11 years. 11 years of Sunday dinners that did not happen. 11 years of a grandson Hollis never met. They got 2 sentences at the very end. They could have had 11 years. The phone call that took 11 years to make took me 90 seconds to dial. How many people are you not speaking to right now over something that, on the last morning of your life, you will not even be able to remember the shape of? I am not telling you these stories to make you sad. I am an old man, and I do not have the time or the cruelty for that. I am telling you because I learned all of this too late to use it well myself, and you are still here, with the screen in your hand and the breath in your chest, and you can still do something I could not. I want to tell you about the smells. People do not talk about this, but a doctor remembers a house by its smell. The dying are often kept in their own homes out where I practiced, and every house had its own air. Cut hay and machine oil in the farmhouses, lavender and old paper in the houses of the widows, pipe tobacco that had soaked into the walls for 40 years. Coffee, always coffee, because somebody in the kitchen is always making coffee they will not drink, because making coffee is something to do with your hands when there is nothing to be done. I mention the smells because grief lives in the small things. Nobody at a deathbed grieves a concept. They grieve a smell, a chair, the particular way a person said your name. I had a patient, a woman named Ruth, who in her last days kept asking for the smell of her husband's work shirt. He had been dead 9 years, 8, I forget exactly. She wanted the shirt. Her daughter found it in a cedar chest and brought it, and Ruth held it against her face and breathed, and she was, for a moment, completely at peace. A flannel shirt. That was heaven to her. Not gold, not glory. The smell of a man's collar from a marriage that had not been easy and had not been perfect, and had been, she told me, the only thing she would not trade. And here is the part I cannot tie up neatly for you, because she did not tie it up for me. The marriage that shirt came from had not been an easy one. She told me, the same afternoon, that there were years she had thought about leaving him, and one year she nearly did. And then she held a dead man's work shirt to her face and called it heaven. I do not have a lesson in that. I have only sat with it for 30 years. People do not love the way the greeting cards say they do. They love a flannel collar from a hard marriage and mean it with their whole chest. Make of that what you can. I never quite have. Let me tell you about fear, because you came here partly to ask about fear. I can see it in the kind of person who clicks on a video like this. You want to know what it is like. You want to know if it hurts. You want to know if there is something on the other side. I cannot tell you about the other side. I am a doctor, not a priest, and the honest doctors and the honest priests both admit at the end that they are guessing. But I can tell you about the fear, because I watched it up close for 50 years, and I learned something about it that surprised me. The fear is almost never about death itself. In the actual final hours, in the room, with the real thing arriving, I almost never saw terror. I saw it in the months before. I saw it in the diagnosis, in the waiting rooms, in the 3 a.m. of a healthy person who has just been told a number. The fear lives in the waiting. People pay for it again and again, months ahead of a thing that only happens once. But at the very end, something else usually comes. I do not have a scientific word for it. The breathing changes. The fight goes out, but not like surrender, more like a man setting down a heavy bag he has carried so long he forgot it was heavy. I have seen people who were terrified for months arrive at the last hour with a strange and total calm, and I have seen them say things in that calm that I have never forgotten. A man named Arnold, a hard man, a man nobody in town liked much, a man who had cheated people in business and had no friends at his bed but me and a hired nurse. In his last hour, he opened his eyes, very clear, and he looked at the ceiling, and he smiled like a boy, and he said, "Oh, it is not what I thought." And then he was gone. I do not know what he saw. I will not pretend to. But I have carried that "oh" for 30 years. Oh, it is not what I thought. There was a woman named Beatrice who frightened me a little, even at the end. She had been a judge, one of the first women to sit on the bench in our part of the state, and she had a way of looking at you that made you feel your collar was crooked. She had no children, and she had outlived every friend, and she told me, flatly, the way she would read a verdict, that she had no regrets at all. I had learned by then not to argue with that. People who announce they have no regrets are usually standing on a trap door, and they know it. I just kept coming, 3 evenings a week, and I would read to her because her eyes had gone. She liked the newspaper, the whole thing, even the prices of hogs. And one night, with the lamp low, in the middle of nothing in particular, she said, "George, do you know what I think about?" I said, "No, Beatrice, tell me." And the judge, who had no regrets, said she thought about a clerk she had been unkind to 40 years before. A young man, nervous, who had filed something wrong, and she had taken him apart in front of the whole courtroom because she could, because she was having a bad morning, and he was small and there. She never saw him again. She did not even remember his name. And 40 years later, dying, with a whole distinguished life behind her, the thing waiting for her in the dark was the face of a frightened young clerk she had crushed for sport. 40 years. She had carried that face 40 years. I tell you that one because we like to imagine our regrets will be grand, the road not taken, the great love lost. But a great many of them are small and mean and cheap. A moment we were unkind because it cost us nothing, and they do not feel small at all when they are the last guests in the room. The dying account for the unkindness more than for almost anything else. Be careful what you do to people who cannot hit back. You may be filing it away for an audience of one, 40 years from now, in a dark room. I had another patient, a quiet man named Henry, a watch repairman, who spent his whole working life bent over other people's broken time with a little glass screwed into his eye. Henry never married. He was not a sad man, but he was a careful one, the kind who never spent and never risked and never, as far as anyone in town could tell, did one single foolish thing in 79 years. At the end, he said to me the saddest sentence I think I ever heard in that chair. He said, "I kept everything so safe." He had kept his money safe, and his heart safe, and his weekends safe, and now it was over, and he lay there having protected a life he had never quite gotten around to spending. He had the same bed at the end the rest of them had. He just got to it with less in his hands. I want to talk to you now about time. At the end, people do not see their life as the long blur they lived it as. It collapses. It comes down to a handful of moments, and those moments are almost never the ones they planned. I asked a dying woman once, a woman named Margaret who had traveled the whole world, who had stood at the pyramids and the Eiffel Tower and the Great Wall. I asked her what she was thinking about. And she did not say Paris. She did not say the pyramids. She said she was thinking about an afternoon when her children were small, and it rained, and they could not go out. And they all built a fort out of couch cushions and ate toast and honey on the living room floor. And she had been annoyed at the time because she had wanted to do something else. I do not even know what. Something that seemed to matter more. She said, "That was the day. I just did not know it was the day." That was the day. I just did not know it was the day. Friend, you are having one of those days right now, and you do not know it. It is happening around you while you are looking at this screen, wishing you were somewhere better. The ordinary Tuesday, the toast on the floor, the voice of someone in the next room. You will want it back so badly at the end, and you are standing inside it right now, thinking it is nothing. This is the thing I needed you to understand. The end does not reach back and make you wish your life had been bigger. It reaches back and makes you wish you had been awake for the size it already was. Let me tell you about a young man, because not everyone I sat with was old, and the young ones taught me the most. His name was Thomas. He was 34. A motorcycle, a wet road, a truck that did not see him. He held on for 2 weeks, and I sat with him most nights because his family was 3 states away and could not get there fast. Thomas knew he was dying. He had all his mind right to the end. And a man of 34 facing it has a different set of regrets than an old woman of 89, and I am going to tell you his, because his is the one that visits me at 3 in the morning. Thomas did not regret a lost love or an empty career. He was too young to have many of those yet. What Thomas regretted, what he said to me over and over in those 2 weeks, was that he had spent his whole short life waiting for it to start. He kept saying, "I thought I was getting ready." He had been getting ready, getting in shape for the life, saving for the life, waiting until he had the right job, the right amount, the right partner, the right time, to actually begin living the life he was constantly preparing for. And then a truck on a wet road, and the preparation was the whole thing. There had been no main event. The waiting room was the whole house. I held his hand when he went. He was not at peace the way the old ones often are. He was robbed, and he knew it. And I drove home that morning, and I sat in my truck in my own driveway for a long time, because I was 51 years old then, and I realized I was doing the exact same thing. I was waiting. I had a wife I was not really looking at, because I was always thinking about the practice. I had children I was providing for instead of knowing. I was preparing for a life that I assumed would politely wait for me to be ready. That morning in the driveway is the closest I ever came to changing in time. I would love to tell you I went inside and became a different man. I got better. I did not get all the way better. That is the honest truth, and I would not respect you enough to lie about it. I am still, at 82, a man who learned the lesson a little too late and spends his evenings now trying to give it to strangers so that maybe one of you learns it early enough to spend it. My wife's name was Helen. She has been gone 6 years now. I want to tell you about the regret I carry, because I have asked you to be honest about yours, and it would be a coward's video if I did not pay the same price. Helen used to ask me to dance in the kitchen. We had a radio on the counter, a little plastic thing, and when a certain kind of song came on, she would hold out her hand. And most of the time, God help me, I said, "Not now." I was reading the paper. I was tired from the road. I was thinking about a patient. "Not now, Helen, maybe later." There was always going to be a later. We had decades of laters lined up like fence posts going off to the horizon. She got sick in the spring. It went fast, faster than my own profession could explain to me. And near the end, she was in a hospital bed we had set up in our own living room, where the radio still sat on the counter in the next room. And one afternoon a song came on. I do not even remember which one. And she could not lift her hand anymore. She just looked at me, and she looked at the kitchen, and we both knew. All those dances, all those nows I had turned into laters. And the laters had finally run out, the way I should have known they always would, because I, of all people, had watched them run out for more than 1,000 other families. I climbed into that narrow bed beside her, as careful as I could, and I held her, and we sort of swayed, as much as two old people can sway lying down. That was our last dance. I had said not now to 1,000 dances, to protect a tiredness that I cannot even feel anymore. I would give back every quiet evening I ever protected for one more not now turned into a yes. So when I tell you to go dance in your kitchen, I am not giving you a nice saying for a coffee mug. I am an old man telling you the single most expensive mistake of his entire life, and begging you, while there is still somebody in your house holding out their hand, do not say, "Not now." I want to tell you what dying people are grateful for, because it is not all regret in that chair. That would be too bleak, and it would not be true. There is gratitude, too, and the gratitude is as plain and surprising as the regret. They are grateful for forgiveness, given and received. I watched more deathbed forgiveness than any man should be lucky enough to see, and it never once involved the wrongdoer deserving it. That is the secret of it. Nobody forgives because the other person earned it. They forgive because they are about to put everything down anyway, and they find, often to their own surprise, that the grudge weighs more than they ever noticed, and lets go easier than they feared. And I will tell you something that may surprise you, because nobody warns you about it. There is laughter in that chair, real laughter, more than you would believe. I have sat at deathbeds where we laughed until I had to wipe my eyes, telling old stories, the dying person setting them up like a comedian who has been waiting 40 years for the room to go quiet enough to land the joke. One old fellow, dignified man, made me promise with a perfectly straight face to make sure they buried him in his other suit, the gray one. No, it was the blue. To make sure they buried him in the good one, not the brown, because the brown one made him look, his words, like a sofa. He died grinning about it. I drove home laughing and crying at the same time, and could not have told you where one stopped. Do not picture the end as only solemn. Some of the best laughs of my whole life happened in those rooms, and they were not nervous laughs. They were the real thing, the kind that only comes when there is nothing left to protect. They are grateful for having been useful to somebody. A man who felt his life had meant nothing would brighten telling me about the time he pulled the neighbor's truck out of a ditch in a blizzard, or the years he coached a team of boys who were not his sons. Not the money he made, the use he was. The dying take a strange and quiet pride in the times they showed up for somebody who needed it, and almost no pride at all in the times they came out ahead. And they are grateful for beauty, the cheap kind, the free kind, the kind that was lying around their whole lives. I cannot tell you how many dying people asked to be moved near a window, to see a tree, to watch a bird at a feeder. Margaret, who had seen the pyramids, wanted, at the end, to see the maple in her own front yard go gold. And she made it to the second week of October, and she saw it. And she said, "Thank you," to no one, to the tree, to all of it. Thank you. I sat with a woman named Agnes, who taught me the last thing on my list, and it is about pride, the quiet kind, the kind that wears a respectable coat. Agnes had been estranged from her sister for 30 years, two old women in the same small county who would cross the street to avoid each other after church. Nobody could even say anymore what the fight had been about. A remark at a wedding, a loan, a man maybe, 60 years back. 30 years of two sisters in the same 5 square miles, close enough to wave, choosing every single day not to. When Agnes was dying, she asked me to drive to her sister's house and ask her to come. So I did. I knocked on the door of an old woman I half knew, and I told her Agnes did not have long and was asking for her. And do you know what that sister said to me, standing in her own doorway with her hands shaking? She said, "Does she want me to come, or does she just need someone there at the end?" As if even now, at the very edge, the bill of the old argument had to be itemized and settled. I said, "Agnes wants her sister." The woman put on her coat. They had a day and a half together. A day and a half, against 30 years, and both of them knowing the arithmetic of what they had thrown away. I will be honest, that one made me angry, and it still does. I am a gentleman by trade and by temper, but I gripped that steering wheel the whole way home. 30 years. Two sisters, a 5-minute drive apart, who could have had 30 Christmases and chose instead to have a day and a half. Nobody did that to them. They did it to themselves, both of them, on purpose, one stubborn morning at a time. And the dying is nobody's fault but that, the waste. That is the part we choose. The years we hand over to a grudge we cannot even remember signing up for. If you take nothing else from an old man tonight, take this. Whatever it is you are protecting by staying angry, it is not worth one of the days you have left, and you have fewer than you think, and you cannot feel them going. There is a question I have learned to ask people while they are still well, and I am going to give it to you, because it is the most useful thing I own. I do not ask them what they want to do before they die. That list is always about places and things. Instead, I ask, when this is over, whose face do you want to be the last one you see? Answer that honestly, and then look at your calendar and look at how much of your one life you are actually giving to that face. For most people, the gap between the two is the whole tragedy in a single number. I am near the end of what I came to say, and I notice I have not given you a single tidy lesson, the kind you can write down and feel finished with. That is on purpose. The dying did not hand me lessons. They handed me their actual selves in the last light. And the only honest thing I can do is hand those people to you and let them do their work. But if you make me say it plainly, here it is. The end is not the dramatic thing the movies promised. There is rarely a great revelation. There is just a person, looking back, seeing with terrible clarity which moments were the real ones, and grieving how many of them they slept through while waiting for a more important life to begin. That more important life never comes. The toast on the floor was the important life. The hand held out by the radio was the important life. The phone call you keep not making is the important life. You came to this video to hear what nobody tells you about the end. So here it is, the whole of it, from a man who sat in the chair more than 1,000 times. The end is not really about the end at all. It is the one place a person can finally see how much an ordinary day was worth, and almost nobody gets to stand there until the days are nearly gone. I am trying to walk you up to that window early. That is the only thing I have worth giving. Now I am going to ask something of you, and I am going to tell you exactly why. If anything I said landed somewhere real in you, give this video a like. I am not chasing numbers at 82. The reason is simple. When you like it, the machine that runs this place shows it to another person. And somewhere out there is a man like Hollis with a phone call he has been not making for 11 years. And your one click might be the thing that puts this in front of him while there is still time. That is the only reason I ask. And I would like to hear from you in the comments. Not a debate, just one honest thing. Earlier I told you about Helen and the dances I turned into laters. So my question to you is this. What is the dance in your own life? What is the now you keep turning into a later? Write it down, where I and a few thousand strangers can see it. Because a thing written down in front of witnesses has a way of finally getting done. And if you want an old country doctor to keep sitting in this chair and telling you the things I learned in the other one, then subscribe, and I will keep coming back as long as I am able. I have to go now. There is a maple in my own front yard, and it is June, and it is green, and I have spent too many years of my life not looking at it. Helen would want me to go look. So I am going to take my own medicine, for once, while I still can. So go on. Call the person you have been thinking of since I first said it. You have always known who it is. Do not turn this one into a later, the way I turned Helen's dances into laters. I will still be right here.